Welcome to Inside the Mavs, presented by Aura. My name is Kevin Gray, Mavericks pre- and post-game host on the Dallas Mavericks Radio Network. Appreciate you joining me here for the latest minisode of Inside the Mavs on Kevin Gray Sports here on YouTube. Make sure you download and subscribe to the Inside the Mavs podcast, wherever you get your podcasts for free, on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Give it a 5-star rating and write a review for it while you're there. And remember, Inside the Mavs is the official Mavericks podcast. I'm 97.1 The Freak, and you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Mavericks moved to a season high of 13 games above 500 to 42-29 after getting a 10-point win on the road over the Utah Jazz, 115-105, as the Mavericks begin their most important road trip of the season with a win as they get ready for two huge games against the Sacramento Kings on Tuesday and on Friday. But the Mavericks handled their business on the road the way that they needed to get their fourth straight win, and now have won 8 of their last 9 games, and for now remain in 7th in the Western Conference. Both the Phoenix Suns lost to the San Antonio Spurs on Monday. Victor Wembanyama did not play for San Antonio, as the Spurs found a way to get it done at home against Phoenix. Sacramento handled their business at home against the Philadelphia 76ers on Monday night. They'll be on the second night of a back-to-back as well, but they'll be awaiting the Dallas Mavericks to come to Sacktown on Tuesday night. And the Mavericks, of course, will be on the second night of a back-to-back as they continue their 5-game road trip. But we'll worry about that on Tuesday, as the Mavericks found a way to get a gutsy win over a game Utah Jazz team who saw the return of Jordan Clarkson to the lineup. John Collins also played for the Utah Jazz, and you know how much he loves playing against the Dallas Mavericks. The Jazz got 34 points from Lauri Markkanen, but the Mavericks were able to get a monster double-double from Daniel Gafford, who also had 5 blocks on the night. Luka Doncic had his 19th triple-double on the season with his 29 points, 13 assists, and 12 rebounds. Kyrie Irving poured in 27 as well, and despite the Mavericks only shooting 28% from 3 and only hitting 12 threes on the night, they were able to get some timely three-point shot making from Tim Hardaway Jr., especially in the first quarter, where he kept the Mavericks in it, scoring 11 points in that first quarter, going 3 of 3 from downtown, including a buzzer beater at the end of the first quarter to cut the Jazz lead to 4 going into the second. But also PJ Washington hitting a couple of timely threes as well, as the Mavericks saw Washington go 6 of 12 from the field. He had 16 points in the game, knocking down 2 threes, as the Mavericks were able to get an important win on the road to continue their momentum as they move forward on this 5-game road trip. And it was a sloppy game at times, and at times the Mavericks looked a little lethargic, especially on the defensive end, where, of course, playing in altitude are going to test your limits from a physicality standpoint. And in the first quarter, the Mavericks defensively were simply not good, giving up 41 points, despite the fact that if you look in the first quarter, the Mavericks themselves shot 62.5% from the field, going 15 of 24, but the Jazz shot 54% themselves in that first period, getting 41 points. But the Mavericks defense got better as the game went on, even with their shot making not being there from the three-point line. A perfect example of that is in the second quarter, where the Mavericks went 0 of 6 from downtown, but still found a way to keep themselves in the game, only being down by 5 at the end of the first half. PJ Washington had 6 points in that second quarter, as the Jazz were able to maintain roughly a 5-point lead throughout a majority of that second quarter. But Daniel Gafford and company were trying to keep themselves in it, and Gafford was especially good in this game for the Mavericks. As you looked at the numbers, we mentioned the defense that he had in terms of the 5 blocks, but my man also had 5 assists on the night when you look at the way that he was passing the ball, getting guys like Kyrie Irving on backdoor cuts, finding guys open, as well as he was able to really help the Mavericks from a passing standpoint. And as I mentioned, the Mavericks were able to keep themselves in it, down by 5 in the second half. But Daniel Gafford was doing it on both ends. One of the signature plays, especially in that second quarter, he gets the block on one end, and then Luka Doncic finds PJ Washington for a dunk in transition on the other end to cut the Jazz lead to 1. at one point with about 9.5 minutes left in that second quarter. That was just one example of the Mavericks keeping themselves in this game, where at times the Jazz were playing well offensively, but the Mavericks kept themselves close and tethered to the Jazz to give them an opportunity, especially going into the second half, to be able to turn things around. And as I mentioned, the defense got better as the game went on. The Mavericks gave up 41 points in the first quarter, 25 points in the second quarter. And by the time you got to the second half, you felt the momentum shift start to happen for the Mavericks based on the way that they were playing against the Jazz. And that was led by Daniel Gafford with his defense on one end and obviously being a presence on the offensive end, not just with his scoring on the inside where he was a perfect 6 for 6 in this game, but his passing was really good in this game, finding guys, cutting to the basket, and being able to finish at the rim. More on the other side of the break, but let's take a quick break here on our minisode of Inside the Mavs I here from today's sponsor of our video and hear from Aura. Today's video is brought to you by Aura. Do a Google search on your name and email address to see how much information comes up about you. I was devastated by the amount of information that I could be seeing searching my name and profile, and I knew then I needed to be protected for not just myself, but also for my family. Data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who may want to target you. Your full name, email, home address, health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it protects me from hackers who could use this information to help them access my social media accounts, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats that I can't see. It's really easy to set up, so I don't have to download several different apps to get things like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more. I get everything at one affordable price. You may already have one of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work to protect me and my family so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/Kevin Gray to start your 2-week free trial. Please see the link in the description. Back here on Inside the Mavs. Again, thank you to our sponsor for today's video and Aura for that message there. The Mavericks, as I mentioned, get the 10-point win on the road against the Utah Jazz, going into the second half down by 5 to begin the second half, as the Jazz had a 7-point lead with just under 8 minutes left in that third quarter. But that's when things turned around, especially on the defensive end for the Mavericks, who were able to use a 13-2 run after being down by 7 to be able to get themselves back into the game. They eventually take an 83-79 lead as Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic really turned it up in the second half. They combined for 56 points in the game, 36 of which came in the second half. And when you look at that third quarter where the Mavericks outscored the Jazz 27-22, Kyrie Irving was special with 9 points, knocking down 3 3-pointers. As I mentioned, the 3-pointer that he had to put them up by 4 at 83-79. Luka Doncic also going 2 of 4 from downtown. They combined for 19 of the 27 third quarter points that the Mavericks were able to score. And as they entered into the fourth quarter, tied at 88, you felt that the Mavericks, who knocked down 5 threes in that third quarter, finally started to turn things around with some shot making, especially from 3. Again, Daniel Gafford's passing was spectacular, I thought, in this game on Monday against the Utah Jazz. In that third quarter, he had an assist to Derrick Jones Jr., who was able to get an and one that was a big bucket in that third quarter as well. But it was your superstars in Luka and Kyrie carrying the load offensively and getting you back in it. Luka Doncic knocking down that step-back 3-pointer to get him to 10 points in that third, as they gave the Mavericks that 1-point lead at 80-79 with about 6 minutes left in the third. And that's when you finally felt that the Mavericks, who had had an uphill climb throughout the course of the game, really get themselves to a point where they felt good about some of their shot making starting to go down in that third quarter, but more importantly, defensively shutting things down when it came to Lauri Markkanen and the Utah Jazz. You look at what Lauri Markkanen did in this game. As I mentioned, he had 34 points in the second half, though. When you look at what he had 14 points in that second half against the Dallas Mavericks, but at the same time, no one else was in double figures for Utah in the second half as the Mavericks were able to clamp down defensively. But then the third quarter, that's when things really turned around for the Mavericks, and you saw them really get themselves going defensively. And that's another mark of a maturing team. We've talked about it time and time again. When shots aren't falling for the Mavericks, they had tended to hang their heads and not get back on the defensive end. You can't say that about this team anymore. They are finding ways to continue to remain in ball games, doing all the little things, diving on the floor for loose balls, being able to continue to keep themselves locked in on the defensive end, turning defense into offense. Obviously, in this game for the Mavericks, you look at what they were able to do from a turnover standpoint. They were able to force 13 Jazz turnovers in this game while only committing 6 of their own. In this game, they were able to get 18 fast break points. They scored 16 points off the 13 turnovers that they created. So turning defense into offense, finishing in transition with the 18 points in the fast break that they had. And that's how you're able, when shots aren't falling, to get yourself some easy buckets. And you do so by turning it around on the defensive end. But that huge run that they were able to make to take control of the game at that point in the third quarter, that 13-2 run, really gave you an indication that the Mavericks were going to keep themselves in this game and potentially find a way to turn it all the way around to get the win. And then we go into the fourth quarter after the Mavericks were able to get the game tied with a Derek Lively bucket with about a minute and a half left in that third. You were tied at 88 going into the fourth quarter. The Mavericks were able to use a 16-2 run to really take control of the game and put it away. PJ Washington, with timely three-point shot making, was able to knock down a three-pointer in the right corner to extend the Mavericks lead to 4 at 100-96 with about 8.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, knocking down another three that was really kind of the dagger in the game, putting them up by 11 with 5.5 minutes left. And from there, the Mavericks were in control of this game. But one of the signature plays of this game came in the third quarter, just giving you an idea of how we were talking about what the Mavericks were doing, diving on the floor, making sure that they were valuing each possession. Luka Doncic took a charge with 4.5 minutes left in the third quarter when the Mavericks were up 86-82. And when you see your superstar laying his body on the line, being able to put himself in position to make plays defensively, we know he had a season-high 4 steals in the last game that they played against Utah just 4 days ago, and continuing to put himself in those positions to make timely defensive plays. We're never going to accuse Luka Doncic of being one of the best defensive players in the NBA, but when he is able to keep himself committed on the defensive end, and we know what he's going to do offensively, those are the things that are the difference in ball games. And those two big runs, as we mentioned, the 16-2 run that the Mavericks were able to use to get themselves to a 13-point lead with about 4.5 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And then, of course, the 13-2 run that they used to take control of that third quarter. Those are the two biggest runs of the game that allowed the Mavericks to be able to get the 10-point win on the road. And while, yes, it's concerning that the three-point shot is continuing not to fall right now, as they shot just 28% from three, they continuously find ways to win. That is because they're dominating in terms of getting their opportunities in second chance points and in the rebounding department, where, again, the Utah Jazz, a top 5 rebounding team in this league, the Mavericks were able to out-rebound them by 147-46, keeping them within that margin of, when you're looking at opportunities for the Mavericks to win games, when they're keeping that rebounding margin close and winning it, they're winning games, and they were able to do so. And with their win against Utah on Monday, Mavericks are now 10-0 in their last 10 games against sub-500 teams. So they're beating down the teams that they're supposed to, while putting themselves in position, as they are now 42-29, to get themselves an opportunity to control their own destiny when they take on the Sacramento Kings. And for the Mavericks, not shooting the ball well from 3, 12 of 42 from downtown, but were able to get themselves 10 offensive rebounds, and Daniel Gafford continuing to make the difference on both ends of the floor and adding in and sprinkling in the passing element of his game. And those are the things that, when you're looking at how the profile of these games go, what are the differences in these games that are allowing the Mavericks to win? In this game, they had 31 assists on 44 made field goals, sharing the basketball, and Luka Doncic obviously spearheading that with the way that he had in this game. Of course, his 13 assists for his 19th triple-double on the season. So you saw a little bit of everything over a game Utah Jazz team who you could tell geared up to try to get the upset. As I mentioned, the return of Jordan Clarkson to the lineup. Obviously, John Collins, who went 9 of 16 in this game, had 21 points for Utah. You saw that they were wanting to try and get this win, but the Mavericks stayed in it, stayed composed, which is another hallmark of this team as the second half of the season has gone on, that has seen them now jump to 16-6 over their last 22 games. Coming into the game on Monday, over their last 21 games, third in the NBA in offensive rating, 10th in the NBA in defensive rating, and the defense was really what carried the day for them in the second half. You gave up 41 points in the first quarter alone. You gave up a total of 39 points in the second half against Utah. That is the kind of defense that has to travel with them to Sacramento to give them an opportunity to try and earn a split. And as we start looking forward to what the Mavericks are leading to do here, we mentioned coming into the game that they would need to finish 9-3 in the final 12 games of the season to get to 50 wins. Right now, you got yourself a 1-0 start on that 9-3 possibility in the final 12 games of the season. But if you can find yourself at least getting a split in Sacramento, ideally you want to win both of these games. If you find yourself getting a split, then the goal becomes to finish 7th in the West if you can. If you're not able to pass Sacramento during the remainder of the season, ideally, if you're able to see the Sacramento Kings falter a little bit, you could climb yourself to 6th in the West and secure your spot in the top 6 of the West. But if you don't, the goal will then next to be 7th in the West, to have yourself a home game in that play-in situation where you only need to win one game to lock in your spot in the Western Conference playoffs. But all that's to be decided down the road for the rest of the season. But now, with the Mavericks having played now 71 games on the season, now at 42-29, 11 games left, they have a chance now with the showdown with Sacramento on Tuesday and then again on Friday to put themselves in a terrific spot as they get ready to take on, of course, when you look at what the Houston Rockets are doing right now. They've won 9 straight games. They're only a half game out of the 10th spot in the West. Things will continue to be difficult down the stretch for the Mavericks as they see teams, the Golden State Warriors a couple of times. They still got the Houston Rockets a couple of times. Oklahoma City, who is trying to potentially get the number 1 seed in the Western Conference as well. There are still matchups that the Mavericks are going to have to deal with, but it all starts now with the showdown with the Sacramento Kings on Tuesday. But a gutsy win, and a big shout out to Tim Hardaway Jr., the much maligned Tim Hardaway Jr., who scored 11 points in that first quarter. And if he didn't, the Mavericks would have been in a whole lot more trouble in this game against Utah. But him keeping them in, especially knocking down that three-pointer at the end of the first quarter to cut that lead to 4, really stabilized the Mavericks and helped them keep themselves in that game as their superstars and Luka and Kyrie were able to come along in this game and were able to take over from a scoring standpoint in the second half with the support of Derek Lively and hopefully for PJ Washington, seeing those 2 threes go down, being able to have some confidence as his shot continues to improve, to really feel good about what he can do to help make the Mavericks offense that much better. PJ Washington with those couple of threes hopefully is a confidence booster for him going forward for the rest of this season. But again, a nice 10-point win on the road. They start off their 5-game road trip 1-0. They take on Sacramento on Tuesday. They'll have a couple of days off before taking them on again on Friday in the middle of that 5-game road trip. But now the Mavericks are a season high 13 games above 500, now 20-14 away from the American Airlines Center and playing really good basketball, having now won 4 straight and now 8 of their last 9 games. And again, the defense being the story for them, especially in the second half, holding Utah to just 39 points en route to that double-digit win. So the Mavericks now get ready to take on Sacramento, and we'll see what happens the rest of this week. A crucial week for the Mavericks as they continue to climb up the Western Conference standings. That'll do it for this minisode of Inside the Mavs. Again, appreciate you tuning in here on Kevin Gray Sports on YouTube. Make sure you like and comment on the video as well. And you can follow me on Twitter at Kevin Gray Sports. Let me know what your thoughts are. Give me a vibe check on how you're feeling about the Mavericks right now as they continue to roll, as they continue this all-important 5-game road trip. And you can download the Inside the Mavs podcast, the official Mavericks podcast of 97.1 The Freak, on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts for free. Until then, I'll talk to you after the game against Sacramento on Tuesday right here on Kevin Gray Sports. Peace.